probably most of the women that I was with at the time would have said he's too intense. That sense of the alcoholics being addicted to the bottle and many of the Al-Anons being addicted to the alcoholic. I was an Al-Anon waiting to happen, I would say. But once my wife stopped drinking and went into AA, I no longer had anybody to blame. You have two sick people leaning against each other, and one of them stands up, the other person, in this case me, can land flat on their face. For me, a relapse in Al-Anon is losing trust in a higher power.
Hello and welcome to 12 Steps and 12 Questions. My name is Silvio and I'm an addict. This pod is full of personal and inspirational stories of recovery from addiction. And in every episode, I'll ask each guest the same 12 questions about their life, addiction and recovery. Quick warning, there will be some graphic descriptions and a healthy amount of swearing. For this episode, please welcome Tony. Hi spiritual seekers, welcome to this new episode of 12 Steps and 12 Questions. I'm looking forward to speaking to my guest today as we have someone from Al-Anon with us today. In the meantime, if you or someone you know would like to be a guest on the pod, reach out to me on 12steps12questions@gmail.com or join our WhatsApp group. All links are in the show notes. And with that, let's get to my guest for today. Tony, please introduce yourself.
Hi, Silvio. Thank you for inviting me to be on your podcast. So my name is Tony S., and I'm based in Sheffield. I'm a member of Al-Anon, and I have been a member of Al-Anon for 29 years now.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. That's a long, long time. Before we get going with the first question, how do you... Well, let me rephrase actually right there. Do you have such a thing as abstinence/sobriety and Al-Anon, or do we talk about it in different terms? So just before I make I'm trying to avoid literally all the ignorant mistakes.
Okay. People talk about it in different ways. There's no set language to describe this. What we do is to work the 12 steps.
Right.
And the 12 steps of Al-Anon are exactly the same as the 12 steps of AA, except for step 12. And in step 12, we talk about carrying this message to others. And you guys, AAs talk about carrying this message to alcoholics.
Yeah.
That is the only difference in the 12 steps. So we may well talk about emotional sobriety.
Right. Yes, of course.
Funnily enough, one of the readings today, one of our daily readings, talked about relapses in Al-Anon, slips in Al-Anon. And we certainly do recognize that as a phenomenon, as something that happens as by virtue of being a human being. And we can define that in our own way. For me, a relapse in Al-Anon is losing trust in a higher power. That's the simplest way I can describe it.
Wonderful. Thank you. So, as ever, when it's not about my own fellowship, which is CA and AA, if I get any other terminology wrong or whatever, just call me out on it. Let's get to our first question. The first of the 12 questions I ask every guest on this pod. Question 1, Tony, is, did you have any adverse childhood experiences?
Not in the way that many Al-Anons did. So Al-Anon is a fellowship for friends and family of alcoholics. And many people in Al-Anon will have grown up in alcoholic homes.
Right.
And I didn't. My parents didn't abuse me. They were remarkably loving, affectionate parents. They stayed married for 60 years. And to all intents and purposes, I had a happy home. My most adverse experiences in childhood were at school. So I got a scholarship to a boys' public school. And if I say to you that one of the forms there, the sixth forms, the boys used to walk around wearing spats and had a picture of Queen Victoria on the wall, you will understand what their value system was. It was very racist, homophobic, very misogynistic. No girls in the school, and girls were just to be mocked, frankly. And because I rebelled against that, I was suspended from school at one point. I think I was probably the only boy in my year that wasn't invited to be a prefect when he got to the sixth form. I mean, one of my very good friends was actually sexually abused. He was raped at school. That didn't happen to me. There were some of the male teachers who definitely crossed lines. Probably these days it would be considered to be abuse. There was certainly a table tennis teacher who molested me at one point. But I wouldn't describe my childhood as being unhappy. And it was really only at the fringes. So my mum and dad, brought up during the war, just didn't really deal with emotions, didn't know how to deal with emotions. So I would say I was emotionally stunted. I try not to talk about myself as a victim or think about myself as a victim. But in terms of what in my childhood contributed to me going into a 12-step program, falling in love with an alcoholic. I've managed to do that twice, by the way. I've married 2 alcoholic women. Both of them came in disguise. But I wouldn't pin it down to my childhood.
That's interesting. Thank you. Thank you for sharing, Tony. I've said this many times on here, I don't really ask that question because I think that because we have had adverse childhood experiences that turn us into one thing or another. It's a wonderful question with a view through the prism of addiction and to view our childhoods. I mean, in those terms, if that makes sense. There is the famous ACE study, of course, that was done some years ago about, if you have X amount of adverse childhood experiences, then you're more likely statistically. But we all know, as the ones who have the scars to show for it, that that's not really where it all comes from. Certainly contributes, I would have thought, but it's a matter of opinion, and there's no right or wrong one on this, But it's a great way for us to really get to know the people, to get to know who we are, to get to know our guest, and to calibrate a little bit where they come from, if that makes sense. Take us back just for another second, if you don't mind indulging me a little bit, to that school that you talked about. It sounds like a different era in a different world to what we have. We have so much more and still not enough awareness around so many issues nowadays. And, be it around mental health, be it around racism, and all those things that are really important issues, social issues as well. And it seems as if that was a time and a space where none of that was there.
It absolutely wasn't. It was appalling the way that the very, very few Black boys at school were treated. And as I say, the attitude towards women, the mockery, continually putting down women. I suppose in a way that is abusive, because if that's how you're brought up, and so many products of that school did grow up to be seriously dysfunctional individuals. There's one of them, I won't name him, but there's one of them who is a very, very prominent public figure. And I think if I were to mention his name, many of you would say, oh my God, it's just that was the kind of person that school was producing. So the good thing about it was it gave me something to rebel against. So as the child of the 60s, Rolling Stones, David Bowie played at the pub down the road from us. My friend's brother played in his band. So that sense of rock and roll and rebellion and coming out against the establishment, the imperial view of Britain, which is what we were force-fed at school, did contribute towards my identity.
Yeah. It's a matter for an entirely different podcast, so we're not going to go at length into it. But the idea, I just find it abhorrent. One, the idea of not having any women around. In any space, really. I mean, most boys' nights out, they're just, it's a bit soulless, I suppose. But more than anything, this idea of here we are as men, we get together in these cliques, and it's just a really sad state of affairs if that's all we do. When we get together, just men, just boys everywhere, and all that we do is we talk badly about women. It's an appalling look, I have to say, and it's perhaps one of the many, many reasons why there are quite a few issues around in our lives, in our daily lives today, that affect women, adversely. It's a different podcast, so let's return to our questions. Thank you for sharing this, Tony. It's really fascinating insight. Our question 2. What did the moment you first got hooked / the fun times look like? Now, when I wrote these questions, obviously I was only thinking of interviewing people who were in AA or in CA, and most of us in one way or another have a party phase of sorts. So let's turn this around a little bit for Al-Anon and I'd turn it around for other fellowships and rephrase it. How would we rephrase it for Al-Anon, do you think?
Well, I think many of us in Al-Anon would recognize our addictions, but they are different to alcohol. So in terms of that golden moment where you got hooked, I can still remember my first pint of beer. I loved drinking beer. I loved alcohol as a teenager. The difference for me, though, was that I didn't have the allergy. I didn't have the allergic reaction. So I would drink at parties. We'd smuggle in all sorts of drink. We'd put into our hip flasks, etc. And I loved it. But after a little while, I didn't want any more. I just wanted to go to sleep. So definitely the attraction of alcoholism and the partying, but probably above all else, it was girls. I fortunately, in spite of that misogynistic education I've described to you, I just loved girls. And some of my best friends were girls. So yes, I loved the buzz of the relationships, the romantic relationships. I loved that. I had 2 states, basically. My happy state was when I was in a relationship and in love, my version of in love as a 15-year-old boy or whatever, and an unhappy state when either she chucked me or something had gone wrong and I was girlfriend-less. So that dependency, that sense that my happiness depended upon being in a relationship with a girl and then in later years with a woman was very, very strong. And when I lived with a woman at university and she ended the relationship after we'd been living together for a year, that was one of my absolute rock bottoms. That was when Winston Churchill called it Black Dog, didn't he? That was when I was at York University. I was walking along across the bridge over the Ouse, and I didn't actively think about it or do anything about it, but it was certainly very tempting, the lure of chucking myself into the Ouse, because that relationship had come to an end.
Mm-hmm. In a way, I mean, the obvious question, I suppose, would be, did you or do you see relationships, love relationships, romantic relationships as a form of addictive behavior at that time for yourself?
Absolutely. My first sponsor used to say of his partner that she would chase around after the bottle and he would chase around after her ass.
Yeah, absolutely.
Excuse the vulgarity.
Yeah, not at all. No. We're a very open podcast, and there's a trigger warning at the beginning as well to say that there's some fruity language in here, and I welcome it. We talk about matters that get under our skin, and so fruity language is very much allowed and welcomed. So swear away if we wanted to. Was there any thinking around this time? I mean, you were talking about you as being a sort of in your late teens and early 20s, maybe, that your behavior was a little bit strong, intense, that sort of thing. Was there a sense of that already, or not quite yet?
I was definitely driven. So one of the addictions that many of us in Al-Anon talk about is workaholism. And in terms of a good role model, my dad used to literally work 7 days a week, about 16-hour days. And he used to work from home. So he had his typewriter in the living room, and we tiptoed around him for much of the time. So I absolutely threw myself into student politics, into community projects, and really focused on the career that I wanted to follow. So certainly that was a bit heavy. I think probably most of the women that I was with at the time would have said he's too intense. That sense of the alcoholics being addicted to the bottle, and many of the Al-Anons being addicted to the alcoholic. So I was an Al-Anon waiting to happen, I would say.
Interesting. I mean, as someone who has been told quite often in his life, and quite not rarely by, let me rephrase this. I've often, and mostly by women, been told, you're a bit too intense. You're a bit much.
Yep.
So there's a common. I think there's a commonality here that I find a little bit surprising, because obviously I very much am an alcoholic and an addict. So, but some of those experiences are clearly shared. How did it progress from there? These were, I'm assuming, times where you weren't experiencing any major consequences or quite yet. How did it progress a bit more and a bit further before we come to our question 3, which is about rock bottoms?
Yes. So to just continue the timeline, that was my relationship. We had actually bought a house together. My first serious live-in girlfriend, and she went off with one of our mutual friends. She went off with him, and absolutely overnight she disappeared out of my world. And in saying I was an Al-Anon waiting to happen, the person who I then met and fell into a relationship with, fell in love with, was the person who was the first alcoholic in my life, and who, as a result of that marriage, we were married for 20 years. As a result of that marriage, went into Al-Anon. So he was this woman who showed up, who was very attractive, very funny, very funny, the life and soul of the party.
Yeah.
I used to, in many ways, I used to think of her as being my social secretary. So I don't know whether this makes any sense, but sometimes people talk about having committees in their heads,
Yeah.
and about the roles that we play. Well, the one role I couldn't play, because I wasn't good enough at it, was the jazz hands, the going out there. So you're in a party, you don't know anybody, you sink or swim. Well, I would sink, whereas my wife would just immediately engage with other people. We once went to a party where we didn't know anybody, and I said, I don't really know how to be in this situation. And she said, watch me. And she literally went round the room and spoke to every single person in the room. And of course, when somebody does that, they all say, oh, hi. Yes. Hi. Thank you for coming up and introducing yourself. So it took her about 15 minutes. She came back to me. I was standing there like a lemon in the corner. And she said, see, that's how it's done.
Yeah.
Well, that was of absolutely no use to me whatsoever. It just made me feel even more diminished and less able to do that kind of thing. But if you're a couple and one of you can do that and the other one can't, then it's very easy. I would just metaphorically take half a step backwards and allow my alcoholic to be the bridgehead for me to be social. You know, one of the, I'm sure you know, step 4, one of Bill W.'s instincts that we look at is the social instinct. Well, there was my wife doing that for me. So in other words, rather than me having to work on myself and think about what I needed, she made up for that part of me. And that, we tend not to use the word codependency in Al-Anon, but it's a good shorthand for describing what I'm trying to describe to you.
I don't think it'll come as a surprise to anyone if I say that the roles reversed used to be the way my wife and I would show up at parties, and I'd be the one who'd, quote unquote, go about, mingle, work the room, jazz hands, and she would just gently follow and would not have to do anything or exert herself beyond anything that was perhaps beyond her willingness or capability, social capability. And I, of course, was much helped by the fact that I was either drinking loads or using loads or both, right? So would this then also have been true of your wife at the time?
Yes, she was definitely the party animal. So on our honeymoon, we were at the airport, and I got fed up with all the champagne that our friends were plying us with, but she just carried on drinking. She didn't go to bed that night. We got onto the airplane, and I was fine walking on. She immediately fell flat on her face and said, "Double gin and tonic, please." And over she went, flat on her face. So yeah. But to begin with, one of the things we say in Al-Anon is that alcoholism is cunning, baffling, and I'm trying to think what the third was. Cunning, baffling, and
powerful. Powerful.
Absolutely, cunning, baffling, and powerful. And she hid it. And so when we had children, I just thought that the reason she wasn't able to look after the children in the afternoon was that she was a bit anemic, a bit tired. And I was very happy as the volunteer caretaker to, right, okay, well, I'll take them off you. You have a sleep then.
It sounds really, really interesting, this, to me, this progression, right? That you can see her progression, and at the same time, you see your progression, because I suppose your progression has to keep up with hers, or else things fall apart. Perhaps the marriage falls apart. Our question 3. What were your worst consequences? And finally, your rock bottom. Now, this may take, or this may cover quite a large period of time, but really it's essentially is how did it go bad, and what did it look like? How did it manifest really bad?
Yeah. So it was trauma for me. Trauma isn't a word that is very often used. You don't find it in the Anon literature very much. People will talk about all kinds of other things. But I unashamedly use the word trauma, and particularly PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. So in terms of what physically happened, we lost our first child because if an alcoholic drinks during the pregnancy, then that can result in fetal alcohol syndrome. And we lost Daniel at 28 weeks. We then had 2 live births, and those children are now grown up, perfectly healthy, and living a good life. But then our 4th birth, the same thing happened again. And everybody had said, because alcoholism wasn't being mentioned as a factor, everybody had said, oh, this is 1 in a million, can't possibly happen again. And in many ways, the second stillbirth, that was Nadia at 35 weeks, the second stillbirth was even worse, because by that stage, I knew what it was like to have a child, welcome a child into the world. And those 2 events, together with the outing of my wife by our best friend when we were on holiday, because I didn't know. Denial is very, very strong. And as I say, my wife's cunning, baffling, and powerful disease meant it was covered up. So my friend Phil saying what had happened, outing her, together with the 2 stillbirths were traumatic moments for me. And I wasn't in Al-Anon. I was the strong one. Yeah. That's what I told myself, Silvio. I was the strong one. And I do remember looking up and saying to saying to a higher power, who I didn't particularly have a strong belief in or whatever, you can do anything you like to me and I will survive. And I had this image of myself as like one of these American footballers with these reinforced padding on the shoulders. You've done this and you've done that and you've done the other, and I'm still standing. And that was how I thought of myself, as I was the mature one. I was the strong one. I was the one keeping the job down. I had very responsible job, many people working for me, and bringing the serious money into the house and what have you. And I had this completely false image of myself as somebody who could take the knocks. And then our higher powers have a sense of humor, don't they?
They certainly do.
My higher power said, metaphorically, okay, Tony, how about if your wife stops drinking? What will that do for you? And that coincided with my rock bottom, because up until then, sick though it was in the way I've described it to you, I was kind of okay. I was kind of sleeping at night. I kind of thought I was okay. One of my friend, the friend who'd outed my wife's drinking, said, "Therapy, is that something for you?" And I just said, "No, I don't want to take the lid off the can of worms. I don't know what's going to come out. I don't want to know. I don't want anything to do with that." But once my wife stopped drinking and went into AA, I no longer had anybody to blame. I no longer had a scapegoat. And the way I think about it is, if you have two sick people leaning against each other, and one of them stands up, the other person, in this case me, can land flat on their face. And that's what happened to me. And that was the cue for what became 10 years of panic attacks. This was suppressed, stuffed down trauma that I didn't know how to deal with.
Gosh, Tony, there's so much in this, and I was sort of picking up bits and pieces that I thought were interesting and wanted to get into. So let's slow this down just a little bit. Can we just ever so slightly circle back to what you were saying about the cunning, baffling, powerful disease and your denial, right? Can we try and shine a light on this, on how this worked, or if we can find any, because it's very difficult sometimes to explain our former delusion. I find it difficult sometimes, but I had my own version of it, right? It was pretty obvious that I was having, a major problem with cocaine, right? And somehow a little bit of male conditioning as well. I got this, right? I've got this, right? But there were lies that I kept telling myself, and things there were boundaries that I had, like, oh, I'm never going to be up for like 3 days, for instance, or something like that, right? And they were bound, and I kept pushing them. That's the way my delusion manifested. I'd love to know a little bit more about how your delusion in this alcoholic marriage, how that manifested.
Yes, certainly, Silvio. So I would say I was probably a pretty extreme case.
Right.
So many people in Al-Anon who talk about denial. It's very much a part of the recovery program, is to deal with our denial. And many people who talk about it will say, well, I knew they drank a lot, but I just thought they were going to get through it. I didn't think it was that bad. I had absolutely no idea. So when my friend said, as he did to begin with, he said to my wife, we think, he and his wife think you've got a drink problem. And she said that to me. And, it was as though somebody had said to me, you think you've been living as a guy all these years, Tony. Well, actually, you're a female. It was so far off my map that I just said to her, well, that's nonsense, isn't it? Why on earth would they say that? And then when he confronted me with it, I just said, well, it's just not true. As I say, she was very skillful at hiding it. But nevertheless, my friends could see it. My friends sensed it, and yet I couldn't. And it wasn't, so this is 10 o'clock in the morning in France. And my friends confronted me with this. He said, we think you're in denial that your wife has this alcohol problem. I said, just not true. And he said, well, what would you say to me if I tell you she's been drinking vodka already this morning? And I said, well, just not true. She can't 10 o'clock in the morning. Of course she's not. So he then called my wife in, confronted her with it. And for 5 minutes, she denied it. And then he said, right, I'll tell you exactly where you got the vodka from. It's from that cupboard there. And I saw you do it. And then she fessed up. And it was just totally off my map. It was as though my certainties about what the world is and who I was and what our marriage was, all that ground, that solid ground underneath my feet was just taken away. And I just went into free fall.
It's a shock.
Yeah,
A massive shock.
absolute shock.
Yeah.
It was absolute shock.
And it must look to the outside world. I mean, it's quick shout out to your friend Phil, who, I mean, I obviously don't know what your relationship with him was like then and is now and whatnot, but it's a bloody risk to take.
Absolutely, it is.
And a very, very brave move to call that out in that way. So, wow. Kudos on the one hand. On the other hand, I'm not sure. I want to say, don't try this at home. It's one of those. But this sense of shock of and plus all the other the children that you lost in stillbirth, which is a terribly shocking thing to happen when it does. Clearly contributed to this sense of yours that you're crumbling. And then at the same time, well, maybe not at the same time, but around that time, your wife then, if I followed correctly, went to AA and got sober. Must have been really difficult for you at that time, right? So you went into a long period, you said, of panic attacks. Now I know something of panic attacks, and I can tell you, and you'll probably echo this, they are an absolute shock to the system if they're the proper ones, the real ones, right? Rather than the heightened anxiety ones, which I also had at a different time. If they're the real ones, there's a sense that you're dying. This is it. It's over, right? Was this what you were experiencing?
Yeah, I mean, it used to be so physical. If I was in a car and one happened, it would steam up all the windows.
Yeah.
If I was wearing a light blue shirt, it would turn dark blue within minutes. And all I wanted, as I say, had this professional role, and suddenly this would happen to me. And all I wanted to do was just to leave the room, and I couldn't think straight. It was as though somebody had turned an electric fire on in the back of my head, and it was just frying my brain.
Yeah. It feels really frightening, although physiologically, while a lot is happening and so on, it's actually not dangerous at all. But you feel in danger at that time, don't you? And I remember, always just not really being able to breathe properly and so on and so forth. And if anyone's out there, do get this addressed. It is treatable. Cognitive behavioral therapy and all sorts of other things will really help with that. And we could talk about panic attacks for a while, but we're not going to. We're going to talk about you then coming into the room, because that's what you did, if I got it right, in terms of timing. You chose then to come into Al-Anon. How did you hear about Al-Anon anyway?
If you're enjoying this podcast and would like other addicts and alcoholics to hear it, then please make the pesky AIs and algorithms work their 12th step. Hit like and subscribe.
Okay, so my wife had said to me on one occasion, do you want to find out about alcoholism? And my reply in my ignorance and arrogance to her was, I know all there is to know about alcoholism. It's a moral weakness. You drink or you drank far too much. You shouldn't have done it, and you should just have stopped. There we are, no charge. That is my view on alcoholism. And that's the line I held for several years. And one day, and I don't know what made me, I do know what made me do it. It was the touch of a higher power hand, metaphorically, between my shoulder blades, saying, think differently. Open your mind this tiny bit. One of our readings in one of our daily readers talks about the clenched fist of denial and ignorance in Al-Anon. And it's a clenched fist of ego, self-will, and denial. And what the reading says is, if I can open my clenched fist just the tiniest bit, then a higher power's hand can come in and take my hand, and the higher power will do the rest. And that is exactly what happened for me. I went along to this open AA meeting. There was 44 people in the room, and all the alcoholics thought I was a newcomer. I was a newcomer as an alcoholic. And I would say, no, it's not me, it's her, and point at her. And they completely ignored me. And they carried on saying things like, there's hope. you can recover, you can get better. And the very strong mental image I had of myself was of somebody who was down the bottom of this well with these friendly faces, kind faces, looking over the top of the well, waving at me, saying, "You're okay, you're right down there. We can help you. There is hope for you." And at the end of that meeting, somebody came up to me who was an Al-Anon from that opening meeting and said, "There's a meeting for you on the Saturday." And I went along on the Saturday, and that was 29 and a half years ago. And Al-Anon's completely transformed my life.
Lovely. Wonderful. Thank you. We'll find out how with the rest of the questions. Our question 4, at your worst, did you ever want to die? Did you consider suicide?
So I've described to you that that moment walking across the bridge in York. It was a thought that came into my head and came out again. I actually do a lot of work around suicide prevention, not within Al-Anon, but with a national charity. So I do understand that state of mind and how people can get into that state of mind. I never got that bad. My wife said to me, looking back, she said, "I thought you might take your own life," but I never put the tablets together. I never started. The phrase, the jargon is suicidal ideation, isn't it? I never got that. I never got to that place.
Because, of course, if we get to a place, even with behavioral, if we want to call it behavioral addictions, I don't know if that's the right term or not, so forgive me if I'm misspeaking here. With behavioral addictions, of course, is the fact that a lot of those people who are severely affected will actually end up taking their own life, and that is why they are fatal.
Absolutely. Alcoholism can be a killer. It's a life or death disease for friends and families of alcoholics in exactly the same way as it is for alcoholics as well.
Right. Excellent. Thank you. Our question 5, and again, let's discuss if this needs or how this needs twisting a little bit. So our question 5 is, what other methods did you try to get sober before finding the rooms?
Yeah, well, I tried absolutely everything, Silvio. And I had to do this. I mean, I regard this as part of my journey now. So I had people sticking needles in me with acupuncture. I went to umpteen therapists. I had self-hypnosis. I read every single one of those books. You know, those books that say top of W.H. Smith's, you go in there, read this book and it'll change your life. These self-help books. Well, they're all lying. They're all lying. It doesn't change your life. I read every single one of them. And because I wasn't doing anything, because I wasn't taking any action, I just thought, well, if I can just change my mind, if I can just get the concepts of what this book's talking about, and they all seemed absolutely brilliant. They're very clearly, excitingly expressed, and they gave me hope for a nanosecond while I was reading that book, but they just blooming well didn't work. And I did find myself, after I first came in, a few weeks after I first came in, I was seeing a counsellor on the Tuesday evening. And just as I was walking up the stairs to go and see her, I just thought I would rather be at an Al-Anon meeting. Yeah. That's where I know I'm going to get recovery from this place. I knew from the first meeting the kindness, the humor, the way that people were talking about their alcoholic loved ones and their lives with them in a way that clearly they were managing and having a good life in spite of, in many cases, they're alcoholics still drinking.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much. I feel compelled to nonetheless defend, therapy and even the odd self-help book and so on. They are good things in their own right. They really are. Just because they didn't help us with our rather specific problem, I suppose, it doesn't mean that they're bad in and of themselves. But maybe that's just self-explanatory and it doesn't need my defending. I just feel that I think surely someone is going to get something out of those sort of things, but I sure didn't, and certainly not what I wanted, Thank you, Tony. So when you came into Al-Anon, that's our question 6, did you struggle with the word God?
Not really. I'm not religious. I've never been religious. I'm actually pretty anti-religious. I've studied history, and whether it's the Spanish Inquisition or modern history, religion has led, to my mind, religion has led to so many of the problems in the world, the cruelty in the world that I can't be doing with religion at all. But the idea that there was something that was greater than me, I didn't find that terribly difficult to grasp that. All that they said to me when I first came in, you may well hear the same thing in AA meetings, I don't know. All that they said to me was, the only thing you need to know about your higher power is that it's not you. And I found that quite an easy concept to grasp. And I was very, very fortunate. In my first Al-Anon meeting, there was a guy who became my first sponsor. And he's an ex-miner. He was on the picket lines at Orgreave, really down-to-earth guy. And he talked, he was a very spiritual man, and he talked in a very inspiring way about his relationship with his higher power. And I got it. But I think because I got to that point of, the acronym gift of despair as God, because I got to that point, I've been so softened up by the panic attacks and the despair that I was receptive. I was an open mind. My clenched fist had opened that tiny bit.
Right. Yeah. In that way, as the book says, alcohol is the great persuader, directly or indirectly. And it needs to be, because otherwise you speak of a closed fist. We often speak of closed-mindedness in AA and CA, the how, HOW, honesty, open-mindedness, willingness. I often refer to it personally as closed-heartedness that was plaguing me, right? And if you are closed-hearted, then nothing can really enter, and my disease centers in my heart. It's in my soul and in my heart, and I had to there had to be a crack in there somewhere.
Yes,
no pun intended.
Yeah.
But there had to be something for the light to come in. Yeah, beautifully said. Our question 7: how do you experience your higher power today?
So I have a very, very, very strong belief, faith, trust in a higher power. And all I can say is that experience of being the rebel in school that I described to you, I didn't want, I used to dodge religion. I managed to persuade my dad to write to the school and say, can this boy be excused RE? So I absolutely wouldn't take anything, haven't taken anything that I've been given. It's the version of religion, God, that was handed to me as a teenager was, read this book, it's all in there, believe this. And that doesn't work for me. I have to experience a higher power in my life. And I experience that on a regular basis. I experience miracles. And that isn't a word. I mean, if I'd have heard that in my first Al-Anon meeting, I'd have thought, right, they really have been at the Kool-Aid here. Miracles are loaves and fishes and water into wine and that kind of thing. But I experience miracles on a daily basis, whether it's getting encouragement from seeing people come into Al-Anon and you see the light coming on in their eyes and that sense of hope and recovery and inspiration. Absolutely. One of our slogans is together we can make it. So absolutely inspiration from other people, but it's acted directly in my life. So I'm going to give you a very specific example. I could give you many, many more, Silvio, but here's a very direct, concrete example. So I'm retired now. On my last day at work, the GP gave me a call. The blood test that I'd had taken for something totally different showed up prostate cancer. So I was given a cancer diagnosis on my last day at work. So my dad lived till he was 97. So I'd in my head said, right, I've got 30 years ahead of me. And here we are. There's the GP saying, you've got cancer. And as soon as I got the details, the biopsy and what have you, the oncologist said, this is about to get complicated. In other words, I was stage 3. The tumor was lying against the wall of the prostate. It was about to start pinging itself around my body. So I went for a blood test on the Tuesday. The nurse said, "Oh, you have fasted this morning. You haven't had breakfast, have you?" And I said, "Oh no, sorry, I forgot." "Yeah, you did tell me, but I forgot." And she said, "You have to come back on Friday, and we'll do it again." So I said, "Are you checking for prostate cancer?" She said, "No, that's not what this test is." And I said, "Well, out of the corner of my eye, when I was in the GP's surgery, there was a big thing up there saying test for prostate cancer. Could you test for prostate cancer?" She said, "Well, yeah, we can add that on. Ask your GP and we'll get it added in." So if I hadn't done that, if I hadn't had my breakfast that morning, it was that sequence of events, the Lemony Snicket, the sequence of unfortunate events. Well, this is the sequence of fortunate events for which I will be eternally grateful. So there I am with my cancer diagnosis, and I'm taking the dog for a walk, and I'm starting to feel pains in my chest. And I mention it to my oncologist, which I never otherwise would have done anything about. I'm a bloke, as hopefully in touch with my feminine side as I am now. I'm still a bloke when it comes to health, and I would never have done anything about those chest pains if it hadn't been for the fact I was seeing the oncologist. So I said to him, you want to know how I am? Well, I am getting these chest pains. He said, "Get it sorted out. You've got to get your heart sorted out. Otherwise, I can't give you the radiotherapy. You can't have your cancer treatment." So off I go, and I'm on the surgeon's table, the cardiologist, and he goes white, and he says, "Your coronary arteries are functioning at 1%, Tony." Well, 10% is heart attack territory. I know many people, including somebody I sponsor, whose coronary artery is restricted down to 10%. Mine were at 1%. And he said, "You're a very lucky man to be alive. I'm going to fit a stent for you now as you're on this table." And so this all happened 2 or 3 years ago. And if I say to you, "Silvio, my cancer saved my life," you may well think I've been at the Kool-Aid or whatever. But I know also that you will get it when I say that was a miracle. The diagnosis of my cancer was a miracle. The diagnosis of my heart disease, the coronary artery disease, were a miracle. And 2 years later, said to I'm cancer free. My cardiologist, I said, "Any reason I shouldn't live for another 20, 30 years? He said, "No, you'll be fine." So yeah, I will have to take statins for the rest of my life and what have you, but I have a good life. And I could give you many more examples of a higher power at work in my life. And the way that process, the way I experience it is, I'll say, "Please." I mean, if I have got my wits about me, I'll manage step 11. "Please show me your will for me today. Give me the power to carry that out." But sometimes I just can't do that. And I just say, "Please." And then something happens, something transforms. A miracle for me, as often as not, is about a shift in perception, seeing something in a different way. And that shift of perception will happen in spite of me, not because of me, but in spite of me. And then I go, thanks. And then I go, wow, I'm in awe of what's just happened. And the one thing I absolutely know is that is not as a result of Tony's will and arrogance. That is as a result of a higher power working in my life.
What a wonderful story. Thank you, Tony. Thank you for sharing it. Our question 8. Which parts of the steps were the most difficult for you?
So 6 and 7, I think. And the reason I say that is that once I'd done 4 and 5, I've done them 3 times altogether, but once I'd done them a couple of times, I thought, right, okay, so that's got all my secrets out there. I think I know who I am. One of our readings says, "How can you learn to love yourself if you don't know who you are?" I think I know who I am. I think I do love myself. I love my fellow human beings. And so I'm kind of pretty much there. And the version that I got of 6 and 7 in Anon, wrongly, I think, was people said, "Oh, you get those steps for free." they're the secret steps. You just get them for free. They just happen automatically. So I never, with my sponsor, sat down and said, "Okay, right, let's do step 6 now. Let's do step 7 now." And it's actually only been relatively recently through working with sponsees, and I don't stop at step 5 with my sponsees. We go on through 6 and 7, etc. And it's only been relatively recently that I've fully appreciated what step 6 and 7 are all about. And of course, that's where the change happens. So yeah, those are the ones that eluded me, I would say. Rather, it wasn't that they were difficult. I just didn't understand how to do them.
Yeah, absolutely. Question 9. Which character defects give you most trouble?
Well, I suppose in terms of a very simple answer to that, I can be a greedy bugger.
Right.
And in terms of, okay, Tony, so why did your heart arteries clog up in that way? The answer is because you ate too much damn chocolate for many years. So that was my addiction. And people laugh and joke about sugar addiction and being a chocoholic and what have you, don't they? But
it's not a laughing matter, I don't think.
No, absolutely. It absolutely isn't. And then my sponsor was talking to me about sugar addiction. So for a year, I didn't drink chocolate. I didn't eat chocolate. But what I did was replace chocolate with Stilton cheese. And by Stilton cheese, I don't mean a little tiny bit. I mean a great big lump of Stilton cheese, probably a 3 or 4 pound slice of Stilton cheese. And I would eat that every day. Well, that doesn't do you very much good, does it? So It sounds a bit old fashioned, 7 deadly sins, gluttony.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I believe me, I hear that. I do indeed. Can I just ask, do you still eat like that nowadays, or have you changed the way you eat?
No, I definitely have changed the way I eat. I get as close as I can to a vegan diet. I will eat chicken and I will eat fish from time to time, but as often as not, it's falafel and hummus and what have you, vegetables and that sort of thing. And when you realize what you've done to yourself, sorry, I'll put it in the eye. When I realized what I'd done to myself through excess eating of the wrong things, then it's, I mean, my cardiologist said, "Oh, well, it's everything in moderation, Tony." I'm sorry, I can't do sugar in moderation. I have to cut sugar out. Yeah.
Slightly off script, how difficult was that for you? I'm asking because, we have so many cross addictions and cross afflictions, do we not? And sugar addiction is one that, and I've often said this on here in one form or another, is one that I find it difficult to get around it. And like you and like most other addicts, I think, in one way or another, we don't have a dial, we have an on or off switch. How difficult was it for you to give up sugar?
To be abstinent wasn't difficult at all. To try and cut down, I just couldn't do it.
Interesting. Thank you, Tony. Question 10. What's the best thing recovery has given you?
So one of our questions in one of our pamphlets, it's an Anon leaflet of the 12 steps and 12 traditions. And in the introduction, it's got this brilliant question there. And the question is, what do you think living is for? And recovery has given me a purpose in life and an answer to that question. And my answer, very simply, is to serve. And that isn't a kind of Uriah Heep, ever so humble, what do you want, Your Majesty? I don't mean that kind of service at all. I mean giving back in Al-Anon. If I do service in Al-Anon every day for the rest of my life, I won't be able to give back everything that I have received. So this isn't a kind of, aren't I great? Look at me, guys. Look, what a fantastic example of recovery. I can't remember the phrase you used, Silvio, but a kind of Al-Anon God or whatever it was. It's not that at all, but just to be there for people who are struggling. So that is absolute part of service. But the way I think about it is that what I want to do in my life is to do the best with what I've got, with what I've been given. And I have been given many gifts, many of them through recovery. I can really listen now. I can really empathize. I can be a good sponsor. I am a fantastic granddad. I tell great stories to my grandchildren. I'm very loyal. And also through my profession, through that workaholism, it does have an upside. And that upside is it can make you very successful in your career. I had a very successful career. And I live in Sheffield. I know people in Sheffield. I'm trying to find the best way of phrasing it. I know the chief executive of the council, chief executive of the Crucible Theatre, etc., 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 chief constable, etc. So when somebody said to me, "Would you join us in doing suicide prevention work?" I said, "Yeah, I'd be happy to help." And I said, "What can my contribution be?" And they said, "Bring your address book." Okay, so I can do that. I've written and self-published a children's book, and recorded that as audio books and what have you. My grandchildren, several of them, listen to it every single night, and I ham it up with all these ridiculous voices and what have you. Great fun, and they love it. So service can take many forms. As a dad, as somebody in Al-Anon, as doing public service, doing voluntary service, doing Al-Anon service, and I love to do that. And so that gives me a good answer to that question. And that for me is the biggest thing that I've got from recovery. I mean, I could add that relationship with a higher power as well, but I think they're intertwined.
I think everyone is going to want an answer to this. What's the name of the book?
Banksy and the Yin Yang Twins. And Banksy is the most notorious criminal in Southeast London, but he has an Achilles heel. And his Achilles heel is that he loves ants, especially baby ants. And he goes to rob the bank, and there is an ant walking across the forehead of the bank manager. So he puts his pistols down to rescue the ant and take the ant to the vet because he's worried that the ant might be injured, and so on.
Lovely. This is really great. Thank you so much. I had no idea of any of this. So for the listener, right. This was as much a surprise to me as it is to you. Banksy and the Yin Yang Twins.
That's it. That's the title.
Lovely.
You won't find an ISBN number. It's self-published. But if anybody wants to drop me a note through you, Silvio, I'm more than happy to pop a copy in the post.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. If anybody wants it, get in touch with me. 12steps12questions@gmail.com. Question 11. What would you say to a newcomer or someone wondering if they're an addict, or in this case, if they're an Al-Anon?
So our traditions are very helpful. So having said that, our steps mirror the AA steps, the traditions don't. And one of our traditions says the only requirement for membership is that there be a problem with a friend or relative, a problem with drinking with a friend or relative. So do you qualify to be in Al-Anon is a question that many newcomers ask. They ask themselves, am I okay to be here? Is this really for me? And the way I think about it is that Oprah Winfrey answered that question once. She was talking about Al-Anon, and she said, look, this program of recovery will do you so much good that even if you don't have an alcoholic in your life, just lie. Just get yourself into an Al-Anon meeting. It will do you good. And so if frankly, if somebody doesn't know an alcoholic, they're probably not looking very hard around them. So I think most people will qualify in one way or another.
Yeah, right. Great. Thank you. Got to say, though, that Oprah clearly isn't working a program of rigorous honesty there. We'll leave that here, She meant well.
Yeah.
Question 12, our last question for the day. Tony, what do you want your higher power to say to you, quote unquote, at the pearly gates?
Okay, so I'll confess, Silvio, I have listened to this 12 and 12 podcast a couple of times, and I knew this question was coming up, and it's the one that I've had to think about the most, because although I believe totally in a higher power acting in my life, I have no idea whether there's an afterlife or not. I have no idea, and that really doesn't bother me in the least. That I don't know. My own personal take on that is that the human brain is not engineered to know about what happens next. And I'm quite comfortable with that. I'm quite comfortable with being a human being. And if there is, fine. And if there isn't, I won't know the first thing about it. So what is the point of fretting about it now? However, in that scenario, what I would value and what I would like to hear is "come home." The word, those 2 4-letter words, "come home," because and that has a double meaning to me. Because my journey of recovery feels like I'm coming home. I'm coming back to myself as a human being. I am now the person that I believe God put me on this earth to be.
Yeah.
And
it's a shared sentiment.
Yeah. And I went all the way around the back of the mountain and meandered all over the place before I got to this place. So I do feel like I'm back on track. I'm on my path, and that it's a spiritual path. What's the spiritual path? It's my life as a human being. So that's one meaning. The other meaning for me, so I've mentioned I haven't mentioned my profession. My profession was in housing. I saw the film Kathy Come Home when I was 10 years old. It was a Wednesday play for today, way before your time, Silvia. You won't have come across this, maybe.
No.
You'll find it on the internet. It's Kathy Come Home, directed by Ken Loach, and
no less.
Yeah, and I was allowed, for whatever reason, a miracle. My parents let me stay up. It was way past my bedtime when I was 10 years old, but I stayed up, watched Kathy Come Home, and decided that that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to work towards alleviating homelessness and providing roofs over people's heads. That's what I wanted to do. In the organization I worked for until I retired a couple of years ago, we had that phrase, "come home," literally engraved in tablets of stone on the threshold to our office. So every day I would walk into the office and I would walk over those words, "come home." And that's what we aimed to make our organization. We aimed to make it a family, a sense of coming home to a lovely place to work. In all our affairs, I used everything that was in that 12-step program and recovery and what have you in the way that I showed up for work, in the way that I coached younger people, in the way that I led. And I'm not talking about job descriptions here. For me, a leader is anybody who wants to make things better tomorrow than it is today, whether it's changing ourselves, leading our own recovery in partnership with a higher power, or whether it's leading a group in Al-Anon, whether it's making the tea in a meeting, whether it's listening to somebody. For me, anybody who wants to make things better, in other words, anybody who wants to change. This is all about change. This program of recovery is all about change. Anybody who wants to change and change their world for the better is a leader, has the potential to be a leader. And that phrase there, "come home," was came directly from Kathy Come Home. Everybody knew my story at work. I would all tell everybody about Kathy Come Home and that film and the impact it had on me. And I just thought, I found professionally, I found those words beautiful, and spiritually, I found those words beautiful as well.
Yeah, they are beautiful indeed. Come home. It's a wonderful, wonderful way of ending this podcast. Tony, I'd like to thank you for what's a very witty, insightful, and generous share today. And it's been absolutely brilliant. Thank you for being my guest on 12 Steps and 12 Questions.
Thank you, Silvio. It's been a great pleasure, and it's lovely to have had that conversation with you.
We've come to the end of this episode. Thank you for listening. If you've enjoyed it and would like other addicts and alcoholics to hear it, then please make the pesky AIs and algorithms work their 12th step. Hit like and subscribe. While this pod is based on the 12-step recovery program, it's not officially affiliated with any 12-step fellowship. 12 Steps and 12 Questions is not substance or behavior specific, it's fully self-supporting and not for profit. And you know this next bit. It's not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization or institution. It does not wish to engage in any controversy, and it neither endorses nor opposes any causes.